there, Trekkers, and welcome to Trek Tonight. Tonight's episode, we are featuring the second part of our interview with Vic Mignogna from Star Trek Continues. And as well, we're going to have some words to say about Nichelle Nichols, who passed, and we were all very sad to see her go. So let's get to it. And oh, come on now. Hey, what a day. I promise you things will get smoother than that. That was rough. Hey there, folks. So glad to have you here. I'm going to bring in my good friend and partner in crime, Leo Byrne-Janicek. How are you, Leo?
I'm hot as balls, and I'm broadcasting live from Vulcan in the human history department. It accounts for the brutal heat.
I understand why they say hot as Vulcan.
Hot as Vulcan is not just an expression.
That's right.
But it is the world I am living on. I wish I was on Vulcan for real, because then it wouldn't feel like the planet was on fire, literally.
Yeah, I often felt, and of course, you know, I grew up in New York City, and Leo's in New York City now. But I always felt that just the nature of the island of Manhattan, with all of those steel buildings pressed up against each other, that it was hotter there than it should be.
It was, and it's also, there's a lot of humidity.
Right.
It's went over 90 today, and a lot of places. They're hard, like, okay, you didn't tune in to listen to us bitch about the weather, but it is very hot here in New York City.
Yeah.
I
didn't even venture outside today. We had an index of 104 in Wilmington, Delaware, and I just I was inside all day.
No one would blame you. I had to go out for a few errands, but it was hot inside as well. Anyway.
Yeah, that's right. So, you know, Leo, we were all very saddened to hear that Nichelle Nichols passed away. Right. And, you know, although she certainly lived a good long life. And it started me thinking about moments in Star Trek, and I know it did for you as well, that, you know, perhaps in the original show and other things, she was given a little bit more to do, because unfortunately, she wasn't given a ton to do in the series, besides being like a switchboard operator. But there were a few moments, and some that you don't normally think of. And for me, I thought of Galileo 7. And Galileo 7 is not necessarily, you know, you don't think of that as a Uhura episode.
No.
Because you think of it being mostly about Spock in command of his first command, quote unquote, and being trapped on the planet, and it all happening on the shuttlecraft. But back on the Enterprise, there is no science officer. And as a result of that, Uhura ends up stepping into some of that role on the bridge. And she has a lot more to do in that episode than normally. And then what was the one you were thinking of, Leo?
There's a movie, there's an episode of the animated series called The Lorelei Effect, which is a, let's discuss Galileo 7 first.
Okay.
Unless we've already.
Well, should I run? I have some cheesy clips.
Please run.
Why don't I run those?
Yes.
And then we'll talk.
Yes.
And it's not that one.
Nope.
That 2 days.
What would you have me do? Turn around and leave them there?
You should have sent them out in the first place.
Captain, there's one planet in this solar system capable of sustaining human life. It's type M. Oxygen, nitrogen, and it's listed as Taurus 2. It's unexplored. As far as we can determine with our equipment malfunction, it's just about dead center of the Murasaki effect.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Yes, sir. Set course for Taurus 2. Aye, sir.
Captain, the Columbus has returned from searching quadrant 779X by 534M. Results negative.
Have them proceed to the next one. Any word from engineering on our sensors?
They're working on them, sir. Still inoperable.
What about the transporters?
They're still reported unsafe.
Thank you.
Mr. Scott, as senior lieutenant, I'm taking responsibility for the safety of this ship.
Very thoughtful of you, love.
Ship's log, supplemental. Lieutenant Uhura recording. Due to Chief Engineering Officer Scott's euphoric state of mind, I am assuming command of the Enterprise. I accept full responsibility for my action. A detailed account will be recorded later. Nurse Chapel, until further notice, you will act as Chief Medical Officer.
Yes, Lieutenant.
Ship's log, supplemental, Lieutenant Uhura commanding. We have assembled an all-female rescue party in accordance with Mr. Spock's request.
Greetings. I am Thela, head female of this compound.
Lieutenant Uhura of the Starship Enterprise. We're here to locate Captain Kirk.
Return to your ship. You are not wanted here.
Until we find Captain Kirk, we will not leave. Phasers on stun. Fire. Search the temple. Parties of 2.
In all that,
I'm having a rough time today.
It's a live show, people, just in case.
Oh, it's wild and woolly in here today.
So yes, it was cool to see Uhura act as science officer, and we also another thing I saw online, which was a thing I'd forgotten, was in Balance of Terror. Mr. Styles sort of has his meltdown.
Right.
Uhura takes his position as navigator, so she is a very versatile officer, and like we forget about these little moments where they get to they put her in these positions of responsibility. Not that being communications is not a responsibility, but you know that she's like a utility player, as they say in baseball, which is very cool. Now the Lorelei effect is it was the 4th episode of the animated series where this planet has the signal that calls out and makes men all like, whoa, hey, what's going on? Like, right. Sort of a siren's call. And Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and Redshirt are down on the planet, and they're having their life drained by these women, these platinum blonde, sort of Stepford aliens. And Spock escapes and signals them like, hey, send down an all-female crew. And the fact that this is the first time we see, like, Uhura's like, I'm in command now. Because you see Mr. Scott is all like punch drunk sitting in the center seat, and he's like,
yeah, and it's terrible because they're actually, and obviously I didn't record that part, but there is at least 35 seconds to 40 seconds of just the Enterprise slowly flying in front of the planet, and you hear Mr. Scott singing a song.
Yeah, that was
a very odd moment in the episode, but
that felt like they really had to fill out some time.
Yeah, it was like they were stretching in the episode somehow.
There was a stretch, but I think people forget that you got to take command of the Enterprise and went down all-female security crew with Nurse Chapel, and they're just like they're not having any of it.
They go down there and they kick butt, which is great.
They kick butt and they rescue them, which is very cool. And everything comes back to goes back to sort of standard position at the end of the episode, as in with most TV shows, especially cartoons. Right. But it's a very neat moment to see her take command, and something I would have liked to have seen in the actual live show, but sadly, we haven't. Maybe we'll get.
Well,
to
and
see
it's interesting how they played back that a tiny bit in Strange New Worlds, because you see Uhura in that series, and for those of you who have seen it, and hopefully most of you have, it's a wonderful show. You see her as a cadet, and she does internships with almost every department on the ship.
Yes.
So it plays into that idea that she's a utility player,
Yeah.
that she has the experience to be able to fulfill multiple roles beyond just communications.
It's true, and I like to think that all Starfleet officers, like in a pinch, they could all like pilot the ship. Obviously, some people are better than others.
Right.
But like, okay, I could set a course. I could help rebalance the dilithium crystals, whatever. Like, you get trained for all that stuff because stuff happens.
Right.
People who tend to expire sadly on Star Trek, especially the original show. There were a lot. I don't know the exact numbers, but there's a reason red shirt means what it does these days. So
Yeah, I almost wore a red tunic tonight in honor of the show, and then last time I did that, everybody worried about my health.
Well,
so I figured, well, I won't have that problem again.
Knock on wood.
Yeah.
But we hear as all Star Trek fans, we are very saddened by her passing. She had a background. She was a dancer on Broadway, and she can sing, and she was very talented. And of course, she is the reason. This is a story's been told many times, but she was going to leave the show after the first season. She's like, they don't give me much to do. And as an actor, I understand it's a little frustrating. But she met Martin Luther King, who urged her to stay.
Right.
And this is one of these great stories. The original Star Trek. And of course, Whoopi Goldberg, was watching Star Trek, and she saw her, and she went to the other room and told her mom and says, there's a black woman on our show, and she's not a maid, which for that time was a huge step. She was an officer. She was she was a bridge. She was on the bridge. She was, so we were going to say farewell and live long and prosper, or whatever comes next after we shuffle off this mortal.
Oh, you got me all choked up, Leo, with your post about communications closed.
Yes,
closed. That got me. Got me in the feels.
Yeah, it is. I'm a little teared up. Also, in no way to be diminished, not as big a Star Trek player, but certainly a noted one. David Warner, a British actor, very well known, did a lot of stuff. Had three established Star Trek roles. He was in Star Trek V. He was St. John Talbot, who was the ambassador on that planet at the end of Nowhere. The character was a bit of a drunk, as the rest of the ambassadors were. He played Gorkin in Star Trek VI, who was assassinated. And he also played Gul Madrid in the two-part Chain of Command, torturing Patrick Stewart, who got caught on a Black Ops mission. There are only 4 lights. And that was a great. He was a great villain, but you could also sort of see his position. I mean, I don't want to say I'm not in no way justifying torture, but he was a 3-dimensional character.
Yeah.
Albeit a terrible person, on one level, but he also, like, his daughter was there, and Car's like, how can you show your daughter this? He's like, well, Cardassian children aren't as soft. I forgot exactly what he said, but he there was a cultural reason for it.
Yeah,
but he was terrific in all those appearances. We also miss you, David Warner. Also, he was in Time After Time playing Jack the Ripper. Amongst many of other roles. Very accomplished British actor. Yeah. Sadly, no longer with us. Another loss for both the Star Trek community and the acting community in general. So
yeah.
Now that we've all made you feel terrible,
well, I want to get into so we continued, obviously, our chat, and Leo did the rest of the interview with Vic, and one of the things we were talking about, or you were talking about with Vic at the time, was how the difference between TOS Star Trek, original series Star Trek, and Next Generation, considering the fact that the cast was more of an ensemble in Next Gen than it was in the original series. And that was something that Star Trek Continues expanded on.
Yes.
While in the TOS universe, they gave the show more of a, as it went along, more of a ensemble situation. And I don't know if there's anything extra you want to say about that, but Vic touched on that.
Yeah, I know.
In
I
the
think
second part of our interview.
I'm not sure I could add anything because Vic spoke very passionately.
So at the beginning of this interview, he was talking about the original series and how it was set up. So let's, instead of messing around, let's see if I can do this now. Let's get this right.
It was meant to be about Captain Kirk.
Yes.
Back in the 60s, they had the leading man, and it was about him. It was his show. He was the hero. And it wasn't until the first season in that Spock started getting so much love from the fans that they started writing him in more. And then it became McCoy, and they started developing the relationship between the three of those. And then, of course, in Next Gen, it was much more of an ensemble. And in the motion pictures.
Yes.
In the feature films, Sulu, Chekhov, Uhura, they all got more, played more of a part in the story than they ever did.
Right.
In the original series. We wanted to ride that line. We wanted to bring everybody in more, still making it primarily Kirk's story, but also McCoy and Spock being important players. And then, of course, when you have Chris Doohan playing Scotty, you make Scotty an important part. And then, and so much so that, as you noticed in our opening credits, I actually put Scotty in the opening 4 credits along with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And we had so many great actors and actresses that I didn't want them to just spend 11 episodes going, hailing frequencies open.
Exactly.
Maintaining standard orbit, Captain. Yes. Like, how many times can you do that before you say, you know what? I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. So we made it a point to give everybody a chance to shine, and they all did. I mean, they all did an amazing job. Wyatt as Chekhov and Grant, God rest him, as Sulu. He was like a kid in a candy store.
I'm sure.
He had so much fun playing that role. He looked up to George Takei when he was a little boy, and the chance to play that role. Chris, of course, playing his dad's role. Kim Stinger playing Uhura. Steve Dengler playing Drake, a completely original character.
Yeah.
Kipley, who was amazing as Smith. Michelle Specht playing another character completely created for our series that fit right in so well, and she did a great job with McKenna. Spock, of course, Todd Haberkorn and Chuck Huber and Larry Nemechek, and everybody involved was just amazing.
No, absolutely.
All of our guest stars.
Guest stars. You had a real murderer's row of former Trek actors and also genre actors.
Oh yeah, just classic people that were a part of classic television back around the same era as Star Trek, whether it was Doctor Who or Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica or Buck Rogers, whatever. We had some really great people, and you know what? None of them did it for money.
How did, I mean, I feel like, I'm sure you've been asked this before, but I'm going to ask it again for our viewers. How did anybody ever come to you and want to, like, did any of these actors say, hey, I hear you're doing this amazing Star Trek.
A couple of them did. A couple of them did. Some of them that knew about it did. But at the beginning, nobody knew about it.
No.
And the way that I ended up getting a lot of these actors was because I have a pretty long career in voice acting.
Yes.
And because of my voice acting work, I've had the privilege to attend a lot of Comic-Cons and anime conventions over the years. And I became friends with a lot of these people. 99% of them, whether it was Lou Ferrigno or Aaron Gray or Gigi Edgley or Colin Baker or Claire Kramer or Cass Anvar or Rekha Sharma, John Delancey, whoever it was, they my goodness, our first episode, Jamie Bamber, no matter who it was, Marina Sirtis, Michael Dorn, these were all people that I met and hung out with and chatted with at Comic-Cons in the green room.
Sure.
And we became friends. And so whenever we had a story that had a particular character, I thought, ooh, you know, I'll bet you so-and-so would be great for this. And you don't know whether they'll agree or not, but doesn't hurt to ask, right? Nothing.
No, it does not.
So I would approach them, and with very, very, very few exceptions, they were all like, oh, wow, that sounds great. I'd love to do that.
No, it is like a love letter to Star Trek. And in a very real way, it's almost a precursor now to Strange New Worlds, which is exploring those early 23rd century roots of Star Trek. But in a way, you were there. Whether I'm not sure anybody at Paramount would admit to this, because they might not, they wouldn't want to have to cut you a check. This reinvigorated a love for the early Star Trek, which, I mean, as a fan, I grew up with Chris and I grew up watching it on our local.
Oh, me too. I'm right there with you guys. I'm
black and white, my whole black and white TV, channel WPIX at 6 o'clock every night. And
WIIC channel 11 in Pittsburgh at 5 o'clock every day on a 19-inch black and white television.
But of course, Next Generation, they got 7 seasons. And for some people, that was everybody, whatever your first Star Trek is your Star Trek.
Yes.
Kind of thing.
Yes.
Yes. And mine was the original series, although I love all Star Trek. And there's a lot of contention, weirdly, amongst the fans. It's ironic because Star Trek is supposed to be a unifying thing, and people
preach it, brother, preach it. It's supposed to be, Star Trek's is supposed to be about inclusivity.
It is, exactly. And
what's it stand for? What does it stand for?
Infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
Thank you.
Exactly.
What happened to that concept?
It is.
I think each incarnation of Star Trek has been indicative of the time that it was made.
Exactly.
The original Star Trek was action adventure, and by the 80s, people were seeing therapists. And wanted to talk about their feelings. Let's talk about this. And in many ways, Next Generation was more talky, was more cerebral, and let's talk about how we feel. And then, of course, as it went forward, each Star Trek series, I think, really kind of personified the period that it was made in.
Absolutely.
And nothing wrong with that. And when people say to me, I don't like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, and I don't like Discovery and blah, 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 and I'm like, you know what I tell them? They ask me, what do you think of them? What do you think of them? And here's what I say. Number one, I am well aware that they didn't make it for me.
Exactly.
See, the self-centered mentality is, I don't like it. This isn't my Star Trek. Well, newsflash, they didn't make it for me. They're making it for a younger audience. They're making it to get a new generation. They're casting a wide net because they want viewers. At the end of the day, for them, it's a business. It's a business they cannot maintain if they can't get viewers. And if every 55, 65-year-old in the world watched it, it still may not be enough. They're not trying to reach me. They're trying to reach a different target audience. And I respect that. I don't take that personally. That's the first thing I want to say is I know I'm not their target audience. And secondly, my hope is that young people or a younger audience will watch a J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie and go, wow, that was really cool. Wasn't there a show back in the 60s that this was based on? And it'll inspire them to go back and check out the original series.
Yeah.
Or Discovery, or Strange New Worlds, or Picard. People will be interested in going back to see where it all began. And in that respect, I love that all of these Star Trek series are bringing attention to the original.
I could not agree more. I also think it's true that you're talking about. It's always a reflection of the time it was made, and the Discovery, when it started out, it had kind of a darker undertone, but arguably the world was kind of in a dark place, and it could easily be argued we're still in a dark place.
Well, oh yeah, it certainly is.
But Star Trek has always been a very hopeful.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm glad you said that, because I think that's a very, very important point to make. If you create something in this culture, you can either create something that is reflective of the culture, that is indicative of the anger and the cynicism and the hatred and the darkness that exists now, or you can create something that's uplifting. Yeah. You can create something that's counterculture, that says, hey, it doesn't have to be dark and dystopian and violent, and you know what I mean? It can be uplifting. Let's aspire to be more than we are. That's what Roddenberry tried to do with the original series. Yeah. Honestly, that's why I think it's endured 60 years.
I would agree. It's, as Kirk said in Arenas, I will not kill today. Like the idea is like, he realizes that there's still part of him that is kind of savage, that humans are not evolved yet, but they are working on it. To me, that's a more hopeful message than being like, well, we're all very enlightened. I would love to live in the 24th century in a post-scarcity society where all of my basic needs are taken care of by the state. You know, that nobody has. Everybody has a home. Everybody has food on their plate. Everybody has clothes to wear and a place to go.
But it'll never happen, because the people that run the state are are broken human beings. The people behind everything are greedy, self-serving human beings. It's like, you know, people talk about communism and, oh, what a great idea if we all have the same. You know who doesn't have the same? The people in charge.
No, there's always
people in charge have 100 times more than you do. Yeah. They're richer and more wealthy and have all of these amenities and opulent lifestyles, while they're telling everybody else you need to live at these modest means. Yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
Exactly. Well, that is very much a human problem.
You're exactly right, and that's what needs to change, is the human condition.
I can't hear you, and I'm not sure if you can hear me. I think you are muted.
I am having problems tonight.
And I'm tripping over my own tongue. There's technical problems.
What a show! What a show! That was a great second half to that interview. We have a little bit more continue with that conversation. But any thoughts at this point, Leo?
It was a little intimidating to talk with him. There was the two of us. Just to give you a little peek behind the curtain, Chris had written a bunch of questions I had about too. Sometimes asking questions is sort of more challenging than writing something yourself, I find.
Right.
Because also I don't want to ask him something that he's already been asked like a million times to try to find
exactly, yeah.
But as a result, when Chris there was a technical, your internet went down.
I don't know if we've really talked about that, but we had some weather related here down in Delaware, technical drama, if you will. Mm-hmm. And not only did I lose, say, my internet, but everything went out. Cell phone went out, everything went out. I guess some hub somewhere got impacted. And so all of a sudden, there was Leo all on his own interviewing, which I think, Leo, I think you did a great job.
Thank you. My improv training paid off finally.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. But at any rate, so you might. I don't know if in the third part Vic says something about. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to talk to Chris another time or not. But we carried on. The show must go on, and so we carried on.
Yes.
All right. Shall we pop up the final part of this?
Absolutely.
All right. Let's get over here.
I did have another idea because remember I had said 13.
Yeah.
The other idea was when we started Star Trek Continues, we were looking to do a little of everything that the original series did.
Sure.
We wanted to tap into everything about the original series. And one of the things that the original series had, a couple of episodes, were humorous episodes.
Yeah.
Trouble with Tribbles.
Oh, perfect.
Now, I wanted to make a lighthearted, humorous episode. Not Tribbles, because in my opinion, that's been overdone.
Sure.
It was a great story, but you can't just keep regurgitating it, you know. It's I think it's got a finite shelf life.
Yes.
So it wasn't going to be Tribbles, but I wanted it to be something lighthearted that put our crew in humorous, comedic situations, very much like I Mud.
Yes.
Or even A Piece of the Action to some extent,
Yeah.
or Shore Leave to some extent, or definitely Trouble with Tribbles. And that's something, I don't want to wax too verbose here, but
please.
That's something else that the original series did so well that fan films miss 99% of the time. Humor. So many fan productions take themselves so seriously. And, you know, it's everything is so serious. And there was a lot of humor. There was a lot of humorous banter between the characters. And a good writer and a good story will look for places to add that humor, to bring some of that brevity, to demonstrate the fun banter between Spock and McCoy, or between Kirk and McCoy, or whatever, between Kirk and Spock.
Yeah.
You know, even our very first episode, in that last scene when they're standing around the captain's chair.
Yeah.
And McCoy's teasing about, wow, Apollo's kind. They sure did love humanity. What's not to love, And Spock's sitting there kind of looking at him, and I look at Spock and I go, oh, now, Mr. Spock, I'm sure they would have loved the Vulcans just as much if they had landed there. And Spock goes, I wasn't, Captain, I'll be at my station. And it's that fun, lighthearted interaction that a lot of fan productions miss. They take themselves and the subject matter so seriously that they don't realize how much that lighthearted interaction was such an endearing part of Star Trek.
It does. It shows the affection these characters have for each other.
Yes.
And also, just on a strictly writing level, you need to sometimes break it. You need to break, if you're in a tense situation. You need to sort of break it a little because it becomes overwhelming. You need to have that little palate cleanser.
Yes, and everybody knows that. I mean, here are you and I sitting here talking about that. Everybody could probably articulate that that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But when they get their own camera and they put their uniform on and they go to make their own thing, they somehow forget the importance of that. Or they don't realize what goes into making the apple pie, if you know what I mean. I'll use your analogy.
Yeah.
They know that they loved it, but they didn't necessarily break it down to the degree that they knew what made it what it was.
Right.
Sure, they know there are apples in there.
Yeah.
Sure, they know there's batter and they know there's cinnamon, you know what I mean? But there are so many other subtleties that make it what it was. And a lot of people, and this is, again, I want to stress this. This is not an insult.
No.
It's not a slight to anyone. It's just a fact. Some people just don't know what they don't know.
Right.
If you asked me to explain the constellations, you know what I would say? I don't really know a lot about that.
Right.
That's not an insult.
No.
I know what I don't know anything about. And some people want to make a Star Trek film, but they're not filmmakers.
Right.
They don't know how to light. They don't know how to move the camera. They don't know how to act
right
a certain way, or to write dialogue, or to edit footage together in a way that's compelling and powerful. They know what they like, but they've not necessarily spent the time training and learning and developing the requisite skills
right
to know how to create what they see in their heads.
No, it's absolutely true. There's no element that can go wrong. It's funny because something like music, lighting, camera work, the acting,
it all has to go right.
It all has to come together. It has to coalesce. And if one thing's off, people are like, "Oh, that something about that struck me wrong."
If one thing is off, the audience, they may enjoy it. They're all varying degrees of enjoyment, but they may be like, "That was good," as opposed to, "Wow, that was great." And you're exactly right. There are 100 things that go into crafting something like this.
Yeah.
And most people would never even know what they are.
And if the ironic thing is, if you're doing your job right, nobody notices, which is ironically the best compliment you can give any professional. It's like, you've done your job so well, nobody noticed that you did it because it seems natural.
Exactly right. You know, even to this day, I haven't watched any of our episodes in a while.
Oh, okay.
Obviously I was immersed in it and I lived it for many years. Every frame, every decision, everything. Like, I was in the middle of it for 5 years plus. But I haven't watched any of them recently. But whenever I do or have, if I've popped into a watch party online or something, and suddenly I see a scene and I look at it and I know that it's me on screen. And I know that I edited that shot. And I know that so-and-so was standing right over here behind camera. And I remember that. And yet it feels like it's its own creation outside of me. I feel like I'm looking at it as a third person.
Well, I'm
like, oh, that's Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. I never say, my production team would tell you.
Yeah.
Whenever Vic talked about our production or our script or whatever, I would say, when Kirk does this or when Kirk says this. I never said, when I say this, when I do that, because in my mind, it was almost like its own separate thing, you know? And now more than ever, because of the time that has passed, I see him and I'm like, wow, that was my favorite time in my life.
Sure.
And I watched them almost as a spectator.
Well, it's good that you can enjoy that, because there are some performers or filmmakers who have trouble watching their own work.
Well, I don't like watching my work as much as I like watching the finished product.
The whole product.
I like seeing them come together and they become, like that old saying, that the sum is greater than its parts, or the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Well, exactly. That is the goal, is to make
it transcends, somehow becomes more than just the sum of its separate parts.
Okay, I can. So I've been getting messages from Chris.
Oh, what does Chris have to say? I'm on the beach in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
I hope you're enjoying the interview.
Yes, I'm sorry. I can't even send mail. They lost the internet where he is.
Oh no.
Which occasionally happens. We're coming up on an hour. Again, I want to thank you for coming here and giving us your very valuable time.
Oh, my pleasure. I really, really appreciate the opportunity. I never, as I'm sure you can tell, by how much I talk about it and how excited I get about it, I never get tired of talking about Star Trek Continues. I am so incredibly proud of everybody that was a part of it, from wardrobe to makeup to props to sets to lighting to sound. Everyone that was involved, I am so incredibly grateful for what everybody came together to make.
No, well, and it's a remarkable product.
Thank
product
you.
seems like the wrong word. A remarkable piece of art. Let's say that. And you've obviously, inspired a lot of people. And I will, as we're closing out, is there anything you'd like to plug? Anything that's coming down the pike for you? Any?
Yeah. You know what? When COVID hit and a lot of businesses kind of dried up, I started doing audiobooks.
Oh, neat.
As I mentioned earlier, I've got a lot of background in voice acting.
Sure.
And I have a studio in my home. And so I was hired by several authors to record their novels. There are several online. I'll mention them quickly. The first one was called In Plain Sight by Dan Willis.
Nice.
Great detective, kind of a great detective story. The second one was called The Crimson Spark by William Hastings. Great fantasy novel. The third one is about to be released, called Paper Doll by Brian Peterson, which is a wonderful historical true story from World War II. And then I would be remiss not to mention These Are the Voyages. Mark Cushman wrote an incredibly exhaustive, comprehensive book about the making of the original series. In fact, he wrote 3 books, one for each season. And a few years back, his publishing company hired me to do an audiobook version. And not only did I do it, but I brought in 80 different actors and personalities, and in some cases, the actual people who were a part of making Star Trek.
Oh, wow.
Dorothy Fontana.
Nice.
Joe D'Agosta, Clint Howard, Bobby Clark, people that were actually part of the series, and people that were part of Star Trek Continues, voicing their counterparts. So like Jerry Finnerman, who was the director of photography for Star Trek, has passed. So guess who voiced Jerry Finnerman in the book? Matt Busey.
Nice.
RDP. So it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. And you feel like you're sitting in the room with the actual people that created Star Trek, whether it's Roddenberry or Justman or Dorothy Fontana or Shatner or Nimoy or anybody. It's amazing. And you can find all of them online, Audible, Amazon, the different places you buy audiobooks. And then also, I'm doing some directing of some original animation projects. I'm also doing some live action acting work and some feature film work that's coming up this year. And then also, finally, I've got several event appearances, Comic-Con type appearances lined up. I've got a big one in Houston coming up called Anime Matsuri at the end of July.
Nice.
I've got another one coming up in mid-August in New York City. Then I've got another one coming up at the end of August in Palm Beach, Florida. And I've got others coming up in the fall. So keep an eye open for any place you or your viewers might see me, and please come and say hello.
Absolutely. I'm very excited about this Star Trek history.
It's amazing, my friend.
So
the guy that wrote the book called me and said, I'm listening to it. I wrote the freaking book and I feel like I've never heard it before. Like it literally comes alive. I've got somebody playing the voice of Gene Roddenberry. So when you're hearing one of his memos to NBC, you're hearing him talk. you feel like you're sitting there with the actual people that made Star Trek, and you're hearing them in their own words talk about the challenges that they faced and the obstacles they had to overcome to get this series made.
That seems like a feast.
These are the voyages, book one.
Book one. And all our viewers, if you care about Star Trek, and I know you do because you're watching this, please rush out and download the audiobook, because that sounds like a veritable feast for any hardcore Star Trek.
You will love it. You will absolutely love it.
Vic, thank you again for coming on and giving us your time and sharing these stories with us.
My pleasure. And you know what? When Chris gets back, if you guys want to set up another one to ask more questions, I'm sure he had some questions he would like to ask.
I know he did.
We'll make another plan to do a part 2 of this sometime if you like.
That would be terrific. Thank you again. I'm going to say live long and prosper.
And to you, my friend. Thank you guys so much. Take care.
There you go. Oh, you're muted again. This is live TV. I can't hear you. You're muted. I'm sorry.
There we go.
There we go.
I was so glad that Vic got to talk about those books, because they really sounded wonderful. And the Voyages book, I can't wait to listen to. I've looked it up, and it's in my list. I want to get a copy of that because it sounds fantastic. Vic also, Sherry Aschenbrenner sent me some other dates, actual dates for Vic, which I'm going to throw out there. He's going to be at UltraCon in Palm Beach, Florida, August 28th and 27th and 28th. Camp Pendleton, San Clemente, California, on September 17th, and at BanzaCon in South Padre, Texas, October 1st and 2nd. So if you guys are, any of you are in those areas and you want to go see Vic, feel free to check those out. I think that would be great. We're actually a little bit short this week. Leo, do you have anything else you want to say or talk about?
No, it's it was interesting. I think I.
Oh, hang on 1 second. I want to put this up. Mindy Peterson said Paper Doll came alive when Vic voiced it. Not only narration, but he acted every single character, and it is amazing. And so, I can only imagine.
Yeah, he's got a real big plate of work coming out. So please download it and enjoy it.
Yeah.
This is for do some summer reading or summer listening, as the case
Yes. Which reminds me, Leo and I are currently working on some audiobook work, and we will let you know when that gets closer to completion.
It's early, but keep an ear out. We'll let you know when something to actually present.
So coming up, we have anybody who has been on the Trek Tonight page, and thank you very much. Knows I posted a little calendar of events for August. We are all eagerly anticipating Lower Decks dropping at the end of the month. What is that? August 25th, I think.
25th.
Yeah. And we are going to start a series dedicated to Lower Decks, where we'll be doing just what we did with Strange New Worlds, looking at each episode as they drop and talking about them. And we're going to do another episode in there about the film Forbidden Planet.
Yes.
And Forbidden Planet was an influence for Gene Roddenberry on creating Star Trek originally. And I just recently watched it. I had never seen it before. Knew of it, but had never seen it before. And it really was fun. I really enjoyed it. And I could easily see where that those influences were. I agree. I mean, it was really, really kind of neat. And actually, it's interesting. I don't want to get too much into it because we'll save it for the show, but it almost runs like a pilot. for a TV show.
Almost, yeah.
Like you could see at that ending how somebody could have taken that and done other episodes with those characters and with that ship. So it's going to be neat. So that's going to be on the 11th, which I guess is next week, right? Yeah.
In 1 week, we'll be breaking down Forbidden Planet just as a sort of amuse-bouche of Star Trek.
Right.
It was, and also just to mention, this is the first appearance of Robbie the Robot, the classic sci-fi robot from the 1950s, who has made multiple appearances in multiple TV shows and movies.
Yeah, Robbie got a lot of work.
He did. He and Leslie Nielsen really, used this to bounce their careers. This sort of good departure point. This is
interesting too, because he's so young in this that it took me a beat or two to recognize him.
It is back when Leslie Nielsen was a very straight-laced leading man, before he sort of hit his humor phase later in his career.
Wacky comedy. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a, I don't want to, I was about to start going off, but I'm going to save it for next week.
Yeah, save it for next week.
Please watch it if you have a copy. I do have a tin edition I bought at a certain anniversary, which has a Robbie the Robot figure in it and some little postcards and extras. But it's worth a watch. It is available to download for, I think, about $3. Mm-hmm. So maybe get a group of you together. You'll pitch in.
Sure.
Watch it. Or rent it somewhere. If people still can rent things in physical media, I don't know.
Yeah, well, you can see Forbidden Planet on pretty much almost every platform. You can rent it on Apple TV. You can rent it on Amazon Prime and several other places. Unfortunately, it's not out there anywhere for free, but it's like $2 or $3. It's not like a big
but
I actually bought it. I shelled out the extra buck. I bought it on Amazon for $4. It was very.
It's a lot of fun, and I think we'll have a lot of fun diving into it. We may have a special guest.
We may. I'm trying to drag one of our good friends into the limelight and have him be on the show. But if not, you're stuck with Leo and I. And we'll be talking about that. And then I think we're going to do the week before. I'm sort of going in and out of order here, but we're going to do a recap episode just to catch everybody up on Lower Decks before it drops. Yeah.
Go over the characters, go over big beats from the different seasons.
Oh, I didn't know this. Hey, I don't know if everybody knows what we're talking about here, but Svengoolie ran it a month ago. I don't know if you watched Svengoolie or not, but I was introduced to Svengoolie by my in-laws. I went up for a weekend to visit them in Pennsylvania, and that's something that they enjoy. Have you ever seen that? Do you know what that is, Leo?
I have no idea.
Okay, it's on MeTV, and it is sort of like the old time. You know when they would do these, they'd have this goofy host, like a Dracula or something, and then they would, they'd run movies, and then the host would pop in between commercials. It's like that. It's sort of an old style way of showing a film, and they usually play kind of cheesy movies, but Forbidden Planet is a great film. So
it is. Me Too horror show. Yeah, it's my favorite iteration of that sort of show is, of course, Count Floyd from SCTV. With a character of that sort of show, who just gets the worst movies. There was for fans of SCTV, which both Chris and I are. There's one where they showed like an Ingmar Bergman-esque film, about sort of, people being depressed. Is what, you don't think being depressed is scary?
Yeah,
Count Floyd, that sort of painted on Widow's Peak and the whole thing.
Yeah, he was always trying to make whatever they were showing into something scary, and it was usually not scary. And that was sort of the joke. But at any rate, do we have any other business, Leo, for us?
I don't think so. I think we've covered all bases, and I don't mind getting out a little early.
Yep, we usually run over, so this is nice.
Nice.
And I'm sure my wife will appreciate it. I can spend some time with her. The only thing is, check out. You want to talk about your blog a tiny bit? Just
Yeah, well, you go to geneset.org, where I post new story. Like, I'm writing a extended story now, and I put a new chapter every Monday. Also, here's a little thing I forgot to plug. Shame on me. A short story I wrote called An Odd Missive, which is also available on geneset.org. I submitted to a script to comic contest, where if the winners have their work, whether it's a screenplay or novel or short story, adapted into comics form, as well as other sort of industry attention. And I made the first cut, which is the quarterfinals. I found that out last Saturday, very late at night, because they had delayed the announcement a couple of weeks. Got to go, guys. Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you, Hardy Girls 66. And I found out like a little before midnight, which was very much a delight. So, knock on wood, at the end of the month, I'll find out if I make it to the semifinals. Then the finalists, which is in later this year. I don't remember. And then I think at the end of the year, they announce the winners. So,
well, best of luck to you on that, Leo. That's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's great. All right, I am going to sign us out of here. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and tune in next week. Hopefully, technically, things will go a little smoother than they did today. But tune in next week for our Forbidden Planet episode, and have a great week, and live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper.